Hello and welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast number 28. I appreciate the recent feedback and people sharing the links of my podcast because my goal is really just to get a message out there, my philosophy out there, which I think can resonate with most people. And this topic is no different than any other thought in my head that I think most people who are looking to compete, who have competed, who are just starting out a fitness journey will appreciate. And as the title reads, variables, which ones are important. I'm going to do a little flashback and talk about variables which I used to use to the ones that I use for clients and to learn of ones that other people will keep track of. Variables are important, and why they're important is because it gathers data. And with the more data that you have, the more you can learn how your body's responding to either a workout, to a diet, to how you're responding, how quickly you're losing body fat, to how fast you're gaining muscle. So there's all sorts of variables out there that you can keep track. Now, I'm not telling you which ones are best, which ones are worst. I'm just going to go over a few different variables that I use with my clients because you have to figure out what works for you. It's amazing because you can use one variable and just look at yourself in the mirror and still make the necessary changes to your plan to ensure progress, or you can have a dozen variables. It really depends on your personality. But I will add, when I talk about the variables, that sometimes keeping track of too many things can be overwhelming. So if one does fall off or you see something not going your way, that can lead to the whole crash and burn and say, fuck it, I never want to do this again. So really, it's something that you have to learn for yourself if you have a coach to discuss with yourself, with your coach. Because honestly, I have clients that will give me a little bit of information and I know and I'm confident that they're nailing it and we can make changes. And then I have clients that will give me many, many pages of documents and Excel sheets. And that's fine also. If you have the time to do it and it helps you and you're a data, a geek, nerd, whatever, that's wonderful because I tend to be on that side also. All right, enough rambling. So when it comes to different types of variables, they will give you different types of data. The first and foremost one is body weight, obviously. We all know that. That's a no-brainer. Body weight doesn't tell the whole picture, though. Body weight changes and fluctuates. I have clients, more so women, and if you are a woman listening to this, you're going to totally agree and nod your head. Your body weight's going to fluctuate even if you are just nailing your diet. If you have your time of the month, approaching your time of the month, coming after your time of the month. So that could be a couple of weeks that your body weight's going up and down, and it's no fault of your own. But that's also why you got to realize and not sweat the small stuff and just go with the flow. But what else reflects body weight changes? It could be from a number of things. First and foremost, even if you hit your macros and your diet right on point, if you have a late meal and you get up early, your body weight could be different from the time before, the day before. If the day before, you had excess sodium, higher than your normal intake, your body weight could be up. If you have excess water or water late in the evening, it could change your body weight. If you had a hard leg training day, for example, that's more blood flowing in the legs, so that's edema, so that can change your body weight. But you want to know what the thing is here. It has no reflection on body fat or gaining body fat. It's just the scale playing games. So what's the answer to that? If you're hearing me say all these negative things about body weight, the best approach is to weigh yourself more frequently as long as you don't let it bother you and freak out. Because this way you will gather more data and you can see a trend, and you can make notes if any of those things happened. Because I always say, in a reoccurring philosophy of mine that I tell my clients, is it's the summation. So if you weigh yourself only once a week, you can have all sorts of fluctuations, which you may not see, which could be a good thing. But what if you weighed yourself Saturday morning and it's 150 pounds? You nail the week, things are going good, then you weigh yourself the following Saturday, it's still 150, but the night before, you maybe had more sodium or that tough workout, and your body weight is actually reflecting those factors rather than you nailing your diet. So that's why weighing in is more frequently can be a benefit, because you can see these changes. That's the way I like to look at it. So another variable that, and if someone were to say, Joe, I don't want to waste up myself every day, I would say 3 times a week. I think that's a good number, and space them out. It could be like Monday, Thursday, or Saturday, at least, a couple days in between. That gives you enough data. So I would say minimum 3 times a week is what I did in the beginning of my last prep, and then probably the last 3 months going into my prep, I weighed myself every day, and I took the average. So if I weighed 150, 152, 151.5, so on and so forth for over 7 days, I just did my Excel sheet, took the average, and then I saw that trend, and I focused that each week to make any necessary changes to my own plan. So that covers body weight. Another popular one, and this is the one that I have probably the most issues with, are body fat calculators. They've come a long way. I think there's that in-body scan, but what's unfortunate, just like those other factors that I mentioned to you, the body fat calculators, the scales, the one at home, they also are regulated by how much water is in your body temperature, and what they're really going after is focusing on muscle mass, because the more muscle mass you have, the more water you have in your body, so therefore it will give you a lower body fat reading. I'm just generalizing. Back in the day, I had one of those handheld body fat tester thingies. I didn't use it for my last prep because I think the batteries were dead and I just didn't bother changing them. But I used to use it, and I would take it, every 3 days or so. I didn't do it every day, like body weight. But it was an interesting thing, because I would take it first thing in the morning, because you need to be constant. Just like body weight, you need to be constant as far as that reading. And typically body weight and that body fat scale, what I was doing personally, first thing in the morning, after the bathroom, before any food or drink, because that gave me a solid baseline for more accuracy. So that's what I was doing for the body fat handheld thingy that I was using. So just throw a number out there. Say I was reading at 7%, and then it would just gradually go down. But for kicks and for my own reasoning, trying to figure out how this thing works many years ago, and what is it exactly reading. So before a workout, I would use it. All right, so I had some food and drink in me. After the workout, I would be much more heated, meaning my body temperature's elevated, and I had a lot more liquid in me, water, drinking throughout my workout, and the reading was much lower, like maybe 1% to 2% lower. And if you're starting out at 10%, 9%, and it drops, well, you're not losing 2% of body fat in a matter of an hour. It's just telling you what the damn thing is reading. So that's what body temperature, amount of water in your body, and all those little factors. That is why I'm not a fan of focusing on those readings, because sometimes when people go in their gyms and they're offering these tests, it's not constant as far as how much water is in you, your body heat. I mean, you could be like 50 degrees out, it could be 80 degrees out, it could be 20 degrees out. You enter the gym just like taking your temperature, it can vary. I mean, it will come back down to normal, but you're just not getting that accuracy. Now, yes, going back to the point of the summation, maybe if you do it once a month, that might be a better idea, because you're going to drive yourself crazy with that. That's just how I feel. So I'm not as much of a fan of the body fat testing. And that goes into the one thing that I believe is even more accurate and more valuable is simply taking pictures of yourself. The downside of taking pictures, you want to make sure that you're constant with that, and you want to have the same lighting, the same clothing, and the same poses, or however you stand being the same, so then you can really monitor each week that you take pictures, or every 2 weeks, or whatever it may be, so that you can compare. Because if I take pictures in my sunny kitchen, gym, which is my garage, which is much darker, well, I'm not, even though I might have lost a few pounds, and it may not be the same look, or I'm sorry, I may not be improving, even though the pictures are showing me different. So that's the one downside with pictures, that you want to be constant with them. And it sounds silly, but you want the same clothing, you want to do the same poses, the same camera angle. That's important, usually straight on, or basically on an up angle a little bit. If you're a shorter person and you have someone taking pictures and they're taller than you and they're looking down, well, you're going to look frumpy. I'm not sure if that's even a word. But that's not going to give you an accurate look, especially if you're going to be competing, because judges are typically looking up at you in the most ideal situation. So you want to emulate that. But even for sending pictures to your coach or for yourself, that slight angle up every single time is best. Again, wearing the same clothes, same lighting, same pose. That you can see physical changes, which to me is super important for beginners, because throwing out the whole body weight thing, the body fat weighing thing, scale, body fat percentage, and you have your body weight. Well, if you're a newbie, your body weight could be remaining the same after a couple of months, because your body composition is changing. Simply meaning, if you're 150 pounds, you could be losing body fat, gaining muscle, and after 2 months, your physique can be improved dramatically. So the scale's not going to give you that, but pictures will. Pictures never lie, So that's why I'm a big fan of taking pictures. And so you can see, and then you can really evaluate yourself. But you want those factors, what I was saying, with the variables about being the same. That is super, super important. Other types of things that you want to keep track during your journey. I'm going to get away from, the physical ones, as far as now talking about strength and performance. This is something that, I focus more so on probably the last 5 or 6 years with my clients, because that matters a lot. Because one could be, I'll give you one main example. Maybe when I first started coaching, it was just body weight and just pushing, getting leaner. But you also got to focus on not losing too much muscle tissue at the same time, especially if you're doing a physique competition. It's not a weight loss contest, and that's something that I tell first timers that ask me, what should I weigh? Well, I don't know. We got to look at how well you do as far as your physique, and the goal is to look your on-time best and to be stage presentable. So one of the things that you want to keep track of to ensure that you're holding on to your muscle, because we can pretty much agree that when you enter a caloric deficit, yes, you could still gain muscle, but there's going to be a point that's going to end, and it's different for everyone, is your strength levels. So all that rambling for the last 2 minutes, I'm referring to how strong you are, as that is super, super important. Because besides seeing it, if you're bench pressing 100 pounds and you're keeping that up or making slight increases and you're losing weight, you're not going to, that's a pretty simplest way of looking that you're not losing muscle tissue. You're getting stronger, you're retaining the muscle, possibly gaining muscle. Now, conversely, if you are losing body weight, body fat, but your strength is in the toilet and you're getting so much weaker, even right in the beginning, well, your diet needs to be addressed because you're losing muscle tissue. You lose muscle tissue, your metabolism will slow down, and then you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, the one disclaimer is that the more advanced competitor that you are, the more muscle you have, the more body fat you may need to lose, especially if you are a top-end competitor like a pro who's going to get super ripped. Yeah, the last couple months, your strength is going to be shitty. I mean, that's inevitable. So the goal is really try to maintain. But a good guideline for a beginner, and especially the first couple months of your prep, using your strength is super important. Now, even if you maintain your strength levels, and say you bench press 100 pounds, and you're like, Joe, I'm not losing strength, but I'm not gaining any. But guess what? You're still the same strength than you were now at 140 pounds compared to when you were 150. So percentage-wise, you're actually stronger by percentage-wise of your body weight, which is pretty, important. So focus on your strength gains, and that's why you want to track your workouts. So you can see where you started, where you're going, and just focusing on that. Because if you're losing so much strength so fast, something needs to be addressed. Either back off on cardio or add a little bit more carbs or protein, whatever it is. That's something that you would discuss with your coach or make that individual assessment yourself. But losing some strength is inevitable. It's just not at a rapid pace. I give you a fine example. I mean, when I first started competing, really not knowing what I was doing, I used to be able to bench press over 200 pounds, in my early 20s or whatever. And then I remember like the last couple of weeks going in, like 135 was difficult. So that was a tremendous drop. And back then, I, again, didn't know what I was doing. I just cut my calories quickly. My preps were really short. So my strength suffered, and I'm pretty confident that I lost muscle tissue. So again, that's a variable that you want to keep track of besides of just your body weight, body fat, and taking pictures. It's your strength levels. Now, there are other things that are not as obvious that I like to go over with clients. And the first thing is sleep habits. Are you sleeping well? Sleeping has gotten really popular over the last couple of years as far as just being healthy, as far as recovery, as far as metabolism, as far as hormones, as far as anxiety, on and on and on. As you notice, there's so many more sleep products out there. That could be a whole another podcast for another day, but keep an eye on your sleep habits. I mean, a common trend is that you may not be sleeping as much when you get in the nitty gritty, but if you're having interrupted sleep, that's something that should be addressed and something that you need to figure out, because sleep helps the body in general, keeps the mind sharp. So that's a variable that you want to keep track of or just be aware of. I've had preps where my sleep sucked. My last prep, my sleep was so much better, and I think that had a lot to do with my mindset. 2 contests ago, or many years ago, I had a ton of pressure, at least I put on myself, just to look a certain way, and I couldn't sleep worth a shit. I would sleep on the downstairs couch. I would sleep on the living room couch. It was just a complete wreck, and I know that hurt my physique. This past time around, just being a little bit more mature and understanding my situation of just being older, and it's a different journey for me, I didn't have any of those sleep issues. So that made a difference in my physique and my whole attitude towards the prep itself. So keep that in mind, and that's something to focus on. Now, obviously, the one major variable that you want to keep track that I have not touched upon yet is your diet. As you know, I'm a fan of counting macros, keeping track of those. But again, it depends on your personality and how much you want to track. Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, I have clients that will show me everything. I have a macro chart that I supply my clients. They fill out as much as they want, which basically has three macros. I do have a column for sleep, cardio, thoughts, and people will add on to it, which is great. I have some people don't send me the chart at all, which is fine because I trust them, at least, because they're paying me for my service. So hopefully they are following the diet. But I like seeing the actual macro chart so I can learn their tendencies. And if they do have up and down days, I look at the summation. So I'm circling back to that. I'm looking at the average for the week because to me, if someone's first starting out, that's more important. I mean, if you're coming within 5 grams of each macro every day, kudos to you, and that's perfect, and that's what we eventually want to strive for so we can have that data and learn more. But if you have a day that's 15 grams higher than carbs, another day that's 5 grams lower, but it works out at the end, initially, that is pretty darn good. So that is data, that's a variable that you can use to your benefit as far as tracking. And there's so many ways of tracking. I mean, the plus side is that the ease of it. When I first started out, it was pen and paper reading labels, and there were some websites, government websites that gave food information. Now, I mean, it's you take a picture of your food with your phone, and boom, it gives you what you want. There's so many apps. If you're not comfortable with an app, you just write it down, pen and paper. For me, example, I'm guilty. I would keep track of one day, figure out what I'm going to eat, and I would eat the same thing all week. So I didn't physically have to track it down every day because I was doing the same thing every day. But when I wanted to change up a food, I would recalibrate in Fat Secret, make the change, and then, all right, I can do this. I can have bread instead of this, or da-da-da, and it would equal out. And then I would stick with that. That was my way of not trying to get overwhelmed with tracking every single day, which worked for me. But I'm not going to lie to myself, so I'm holding myself accountable because it's my own body. So I do like seeing a macro report because it gives me that data as a coach to learn the person's tendencies and to make any changes. And also to ask and see when they keep track of their body weight, if they are tracking and they're nailing the macro report and I see a bump in their weight, then I may ask them, like, did you track properly? Or, maybe you consumed higher sodium, or maybe you had, a couple days of hard training or bad sleep that could reflect your weight, because they could be asking me, Joe, I'm doing it great, but why did my weight spike up and now it's down? So you see where I'm going, it all comes together, the different variables when applying them. Another variable that is something that also goes back and it just popped in my head is just keeping body measurements. For me, if you were to keep a body measurement and you're a male, yeah, you can do biceps, quads, your thigh, your chest, whatnot. I think keeping a body measurement of your waist is pretty good because, especially if you are overweight, because if you are losing body fat, one of the hardest areas and the area that you're not going to be gaining muscle is your waist. So keeping track of that is a nice additive, a nice variable to use. Women, same thing, maybe the hips, because more women will carry body fat in their upper thighs and their glute area, so keeping that. But you want to make sure you have a good tape measure, the same spot every single time. So you got to be careful not to have any discrepancies of holding the tape measure too high or too low, but that takes practice. So in summation, these are basically some variables that you can use to help you guide yourself as far as, your journey and what you want to accomplish. So it goes from body weight to body fat percentage to the scale. Well, that's body weight. I've been talking too long. To using the mirror and pictures, to counting macros and the different variables and how you feel and sleep, to body measurements, and one more, how your clothes are fitting. Because again, that will reflect on your body composition change. That's an easy one. How your clothes are fitting as far as if it's getting loose in your waist, if you're wearing the same pants or jeans all the time, or if you're trying to gain muscle, if you're feeling it tighter in your shoulders or your back area. So that's another variable that you can use. So in conclusion, you really need to pick and choose what works best for you. But at the same time, you don't want to become too obsessed with all these variables because your mind will be hyper-focused on them. And that to me is not healthy. So that is something that you need to figure out for yourself. If you're working with yourself or a coach, pick and choose, again, which ones you think are best. So I'm talking for longer than I have in a while. So that's going to wrap this one up. So if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me at fitfranco@verizon.net. Any questions, or if you want to learn about my coaching, teamfrancobodybuilding.com. To learn more about my services and what I have to offer, you can find me on Instagram under Joe Franco and Team Franco, and also Facebook. Talk to you soon, guys, and thanks for listening.